Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Will the freedom of the press be harmed by a move to make newspapers pay their opponents' legal bills, even if they win? The public has one day left to have their say on these proposals on press regulation, measures which have divided those who report and print investigative stories. Is it endangering one of the cornerstones of democracy, the ability of the press to hold those in power to account, or simply a move to let those who wouldn't otherwise have the money to take on big newspapers voice their complaint when things go wrong? Well, joining us now, Andrew Norfolk, award-winning investigative journalist who uncovered the Rotherham child abuse scandal, unusually here in London tonight, and Jonathan Hayward, founder and CEO of Impress, the only regulator so far to qualify for official recognition. Thank you both very much for coming in. And Andrew, I want to start with you. You are defending newspapers from not having to go through with this, what we call Section 40. Why would it affect your work?
I think it's going to have a crippling effect on investigative journalism in this country. And to give you an example, the Rotherham story that I worked on for 4 years, in August 2013, on our front page, we named a man and we accused him of being a serial abuser of children at a time when he'd not even been questioned by the police, let alone charged with any offence. We spent weeks and weeks in meetings. There's a balancing act, a decision that has to be made. Can we defend this story? We know it's true, but can we defend it if we get sued? We took a brave decision. We published, and that story led to the independent inquiry that found 1,400 girls were abused. It led to the criminal inquiry that sent a large number of men to prison for a long time. If Section 40 comes in, the rules have changed. If we publish that story, we know that we must pay the costs if we're sued. It doesn't matter if we have the evidence to defend it. It doesn't matter if every word of every sentence is true. If any two-bit chancer, if a solicitor wants to represent this man, if a multimillionaire happens to be involved in something similar, they decide to sue us, we can defend it, we can prove it's true, but we pay.
So if you had taken that story to your editor, you think that they wouldn't have dared to publish that, knowing you, a respected, trusted, award-winning journalist, they wouldn't have backed you on that?
I think it remains possible, it remains conceivable that an incredibly brave editor and an owner with incredibly deep pockets would risk losing so much money. But if I think about the pressures that would be put on a newspaper with the resources of the Times, I think about where I started on the Scarborough Evening News as an indentured trainee in my first front page. I think about the Yorkshire Post, where 4 of us worked for 6 months on a classic local government corruption scandal. It's inconceivable that those newspapers would be able to run these stories.
Jonathan, why would you put those sorts of papers and those stories in such jeopardy?
Well, it's a very good question. Let me just roll back a tiny bit to get a bit of context here.
Because I just want you to try and...
What we are trying to achieve, what we at Impress, everyone who's trying to sort of change the system here is trying to make the system more fair. I mean, what Andrew has talked about is what already affects journalists, it affects broadcasters as well. There is the threat of libel. You always, if you're taking on powerful individuals, companies, politicians, powerful figures, there's always that concern. But there is not an incentive
for somebody to come and sue if they thought they might make some money.
No, and what has happened since the Leveson inquiry, what Leveson recommended was there should be a new system where to encourage independent regulation, so the public have got a regulator they can trust, which helps them to rebuild trust in the press, which sadly is the lowest in Europe and in this country post-phone hacking. It's never recovered. In order for the public to have confidence in an independent regulator which would protect journalists, and by joining an independent regulator, publishers should have protections from legal threats. So the other side to the story, which Andrew's telling, and I have great sympathy for Andrew, great admiration for his work, is that if a journalist like Andrew or other colleagues were to join if their newspapers joined a certifiably independent regulator, as opposed to one that's owned and controlled by the industry. So you don't have to pay the fine,
you just sign up to the regulator and the problem's gone?
Certainly independent regulator. We've had a free press in this country for over 300 years. We now have a royal charter. We now have a quango. We have an approved regulator, largely funded by a multimillionaire who has his own reasons for loathing one section of our free press.
I'll come on to that in a moment, but it's not unusual for any industry, broadcasters or doctors or lawyers, to have some kind of body overlooking them, watching over them, I should say, not overlooking. You know, you have the GMC for surgeons, you have, you know, every single body has to go this. Why should the press be unique?
It is the press which has, when it's doing its job correctly, a fundamental role as the eyes and ears of the public to shine a light on every corner, on politicians, on the BBC, on the GMC, on trade union leaders. The role of the press has always been to be free from any idea of government being able to have even the shadow of a fingerprint on our throat.
And this lofty ideal is slightly undermined when you look at who is essentially funding the charity that has backed Impress, Max Mosley, who clearly, for understandable reasons, has his own justification for wanting to be behind this.
There's two issues there. I mean, I think Max Mosley has funded Impress. He's funded a charity which has then funded Impress. It means he has no operational control. But the key point is publishers that want to be part of an independent regulator are quite free to set up their own regulator. The Charter allows for more than one. IPSO, which is the current self-regulator, could, if it wanted to, put itself through the hoops, become certifiably independent. Just one point is also, I think that it's slightly ironic that the same publishers which are so up in arms, we've never seen anything like the coverage over the last 3 weeks in every newspaper in the country over this issue. Most of those newspapers in Ireland are regulated by the Irish Press Council, which is recognised in law and actually overseen by the Irish Justice Minister.
I wish we had longer. But gentlemen, thank you both very much. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I've been getting away with it all